Team, welcome to the very first episode of Brain Easers. We want to take really complex topics and make them really simple. Now, some of you might know me from my other channel, Invest to Live. Some of you might know me from my work in the tech industry, where I'm really heavily focused on AI. That's not the purpose of this channel. This channel is to come up with really complex ideas and make them really simple to understand. The way I think about this is if my kids have a question, how would I answer it for them? And I want to try to do the same thing for you. So, first and foremost, we just launched. I'd love a like and subscribe. And even more than that, more important is if you can give me some ideas of what you'd like to have explained in the easiest way possible, drop a comment below. Now, additionally, what I want to call out is these are not necessarily my opinions. I'm just breaking things down from a fact-based perspective. I typically will always try to have some sort of a reference as well, so I'm not just pulling it out of thin air. So with that, let's start with a pretty hot one today. Why is your electric bill climbing? And we often joke, well, we're going to blame AI. Now, the real lesson here is what is the story with data centers? How is it affecting electricity? And why does it seem like some of us are more affected than others? Well, let me jump in, right? The underlying theme here is that every AI chatbot answer that you get is running on a machine that is hungrier than almost anything we've ever plugged in before. Here's where that power actually goes. Excuse me. Now, before we even begin, I have to call this out, right? This whole entire process of data centers and energy usage is already representing a bigger slice of the grid than most people recognize. About 6% of total energy consumption of all US electricity is now going towards data centers. That's huge. I don't think that that's an opinion, but maybe it is. And the AI heavy ones are growing the fastest of all. It's a big caveat there that data centers are nothing new, but we're really focused on data centers that are generating huge usage of electricity to keep things like GPUs cool to allow for compute power. To put this in terms that anyone can understand, one training cluster is equal to one small city in terms of energy usage, right? So a single hyperscale AI training cluster can draw around 100 megawatts. That's roughly what it takes to power a small city, running around the clock 24/7. Now, I want to call this out again. Not all data centers are created equal. The AI boom that we're seeing right now didn't just add more data centers, it really truly changed what's inside of them. Now, when we think about the old kind of data centers that existed, these are mostly used for storing files and serves things like web pages and email. Traffic comes in bursts, so servers idle a lot of the time. Power use rises and falls with demand. That means sometimes it's running at full steam, sometimes it's barely running at all. But when we think about the AI kind of data center, it's packed with specialized chips, we call them GPUs, that are doing constant math at full tilt. They're training models or answering prompts non-stop. Very little idle time and a much higher draw per rack. Now, again, I want to stress this, team. I work in this industry. I'm not sharing an opinion of whether I think this is good, bad, or ugly. I just want to make sure it's really basic and easy to understand. So let's go another layer deeper here, right? What are three reasons AI chips are so power hungry? Well, the training never really stops. Building a large language model or any large model in general means running thousands of chips at near full power for weeks or months straight. You might hear things like training or working with foundational models or frontier models. These are where you're going to hear that. Every answer that you get costs real watts. Each prompt that you send triggers billions of calculations on power-hungry chips multiplied across millions of users. And cooling is adding even more. All the heat that's being generated has to go somewhere. Cooling systems can add roughly another fifth on top of the compute itself in terms of power usage. And the other thing that makes this particularly tough is depending where you are, you might not feel the strain that much, and this might seem like it's not a big deal. And it could be the total opposite. Depending on where you are, maybe this does feel like an enormous strain and you're seeing your electricity bill go way up, right? So data centers have this propensity to really cluster geographically. That means that where there's one, there's often many. So a few states currently are carrying most of the load as it comes to this process. So I'm not going to read across the entire slide here, but you can clearly see Virginia, North Dakota, Nebraska, Iowa, and Oregon are carrying a significant amount of the strain right now. So it makes sense that that's where we're hearing the most about this. Now, here's the reality for the day to day. That strain is starting to really show up on your electricity bill. So, what does that mean in real terms? We're seeing about an increase of 2.3% year over year rise in the average US retail power price, with data center demand cited as a primary driver. Now, 100,000 households worth of electricity is used annually by a typical AI focused hyperscale data center just in and of itself. We're also seeing quite a bit of pushback coming out now. So, very recently in July 2026, when this video is being made, New York had just become the first US state to pause new large scale data center construction for 1 year. And they're citing electricity prices and grid strain as the reason for this. Now, a little bit of an aside. It's very black and white sometimes when you look at something like this and think, well, is pausing good? What if we get surpassed by another country? What if there's competition from around the world? Now, excuse me one second while I sneeze. Yes. You never sneeze unless you hit record. That's the secret to YouTube. What I want to call out, though, is oftentimes innovation can pop up in place of regulation. So maybe this is a reason for data center builders to start thinking in terms of how to become more efficient, how to build smaller, more module data centers, maybe more use case specific data centers as well. Now, at the video creation right now, we haven't yet figured out how to do that, but we're getting there. So, what actually is being done about it then? Well, we're looking at new power sources. Tech companies are funding nuclear plants and small modular reactors to feed data centers without leaning on the shared grid. Pay for your own power rules are starting to come into place. Emerging policy pledges and state laws are pushing data center operators to fund their own grid upgrades rather than spending the cost to households or spreading the cost to households. Of course, that makes more sense. And the last of this is really smarter cooling and chips. Liquid cooling and more efficient chip designs are cutting the energy need per unit of AI computation. About a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, I attended the NVIDIA conference out in the West Coast in the US, and I saw some really cool innovations in and around the cooling space. They're still very early, but it was a good sign to see that we're starting to think about this. So, what's the takeaway here? Right? AI chips run flat out nonstop. And unlike the bursty old web servers next to them, they need that power to be running all the time. Data centers already draw about 6% of the US electricity, and AI is the fastest growing slice of that pie. That demand is just starting to reach household bills and reshape energy policy in real time. So, team, there it is. That's what's happening. That's why we're seeing an impact, and that's why we're seeing policy happen. So, again, this is Sean from Brain Easers. We're trying to look at complex ideas, explain simply, and I'd love if you'd subscribe and give us a like. Thanks so much for watching. Really appreciate you. And with that, I think what I'd love to ask is, what else do you want me to help explain? I'm open to anything. Team, thanks so much. We'll see you next time.